5 years ago, the last time the French held a presidential election, domestic issues ruled. In particular, there was one: jobs, unemployment. Jobs still matter. After all, there's double-digit unemployment in this country. But it's also about France's place in the world, and in particular, France's place in Europe. Gone with that Brexit referendum is the presumption of an ever-expanding EU. Eurosceptics of various shades made up a majority of the first-round candidates here. And when Marine Le Pen hints at Frexit and talks openly of quitting the euro, it's no longer dismissed as fringe populism. Ahead of Sunday's second-round vote, the contrast couldn't be starker between a far-right leader who sees Europe as part of the problem and her centrist rival, Emmanuel Macron, who sees it as part of the solution. Moreover, on the day of Angela Merkel's first trip to Russia in 2 years, what role for France on the continental stage? Not only when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, European defense and NATO, but how much weight will the next French president carry in an EU where the counterweight, by the way, of Britain will soon be gone? Today in the France 24 debate, well, does the future of Europe hang in the balance? And with us to talk about it, he was an advisor to Czech President Václav Havel, Jacques Rupnik, Director of Research at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening.
Thanks as well to former German ambassador to NATO, advisor to Chancellor Helmut Kohl, Joachim Birrlich. Welcome back.
Pleasure to be here.
From Brussels, Sophie Rauser on the staff of the European Parliament's United Left Bloc that includes French far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Thanks for joining us. And also in Europe's capital, Peter Kleppe. He's fellow at the Open Europe think tank. Nice to see you again. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Can it be business as usual in Brussels after the French election, no matter who wins? The runoff campaign last week began, by the way, with a tale of globalization that's really all about Europe. That duel between the candidates on the picket line at a Whirlpool factory in Amiens, northern France, a factory that's due to relocate to Poland. Marine Le Pen photobombing Macron's sit-down with union reps, forcing the centrist to face the wrath of strikers and to argue the point. Now, on breakfast radio this Tuesday, Macron was saying that the EU is part of the solution, but he's also calling for tariffs now to counter dumping from the likes of India and China, and reform to crack down on so-called posted workers, mainly subcontracted. Posted workers are those employed to do jobs in one EU nation, but paid in their country of origin.
In a given country, we must pay people for the same job in the same way. So we can no longer have a system where for the same job, you, a French worker, would be paid 100, but I can hire a worker from Poland who I'll pay 40.
That's an issue that we've found in our coverage. It comes up a lot when you talk to ordinary French citizens, what the French call les travailleurs détachés, posted workers. Jacques Rupnik, when you listen to Emmanuel Macron, would you say that he's recalibrated his discourse in the face of an electorate that, well, is very skeptical of Europe these days?
Yes, certainly the first round has shown that you have a substantial body of the French electorate, not just Marine Le Pen voters, the Mélenchon voters that is on the far left and on the far right, that are very skeptical in one case on the left and very hostile on the far right. So he's trying to address that. And obviously, you have shown the Whirlpool factory. This has been blown out of proportion by the media, but it is interesting how the two candidates fared there. He went there and he argued for 2 hours about what is Europe, what is today's economy, and what should be the proper response, how you can impose fair conditions for competition on the labor market in Europe. She came there, she was there 20 minutes, did a few selfies, and had a big rout against Macron. And the media concluded she won the day. So this is it. We have one candidate playing on emotions and hostile emotions to others, to Europe. And here is a candidate who's trying to argue the case, very difficult case indeed, but it's a case for Europe and for France in Europe. not some delusions or illusions that he's trying to sell. So I think this is in a way the choice that the French electorate is faced.
Sophie Rasser, when you hear Emmanuel Macron argue against posted workers, you get the sense that well, the protests have gotten through to him and that there will be change in Brussels?
Sorry, yes, it's very hard to hear you from Brussels. But it's a terrible second turn for us, the Insoumis, from Jean-Luc Mélenchon's movement. We have the choice between the extreme right and the extreme market. So of course some of our voters are turning maybe to some abstention, but we have been very clear on the fact that we absolutely reject voting for the Front National. We didn't spend all these years against them. And for example, take the vote in the European Parliament on the posted service, on the posted workers directive. Well, Marine Le Pen abstained. Now the revision of this directive actually in talk in Brussels, in discussion in Brussels, is not solving entirely the problem, because you also have the social security that remains untouched. So you still have some kind of social dumping. So this is one of the problem we have here with Macron, is not telling the whole truth in the story.
It's not enough for you to vote for him against Marine Le Pen this Sunday.
Some of our voters, with most probably around 1/3, if I see the internal consultation that we had just had today, you know, and amongst the Insoumis. But then you have 7 million voters. They are grown-ups. They are free to decide for themselves what they will do. A lot of them will vote for Macron because they think that this is buying us some time to create a bigger group in the National Assembly to oppose both of them, actually, both projects. But of course, some of them have more difficulty to imagine voting for Macron when he is defending on European matters. He's defending exactly the current policies that are put in place here in Brussels. He's defending, for example, this idea of the Eurozone budget. I mean, it's old, very, very old. It was already in the 5-President report in 2015.
Peter Kleppe, do you get the sense that if Macron wins, it will be business as usual, or after this campaign that we've seen here in France, that the French will be more forceful in arguing for change at the European Union level?
I think Macron would be business as usual, unfortunately. If you look at what he's proposing, indeed, a Eurozone budget, basically more transfers to try to fix the Eurozone. I mean, this is clearly not what has worked in the past, so you can only wonder why people are still proposing it. The problem of the Eurozone is that it enables countries like France to go into debt much more deeply than they would have ever been able to without the Eurozone. And this has effectively incentivized, pushed the political class in France not to implement the necessary reforms. François Hollande even lowered the pension age when he entered office, really making the country less competitive. With regards to Macron's idea that there would be false competition from other Eurozone countries, I mean, of course, it's normal that when a company from Poland can offer its services in France, that it does not have to register all its employees under the French social security system. Imagine, that would be incredibly bureaucratic. It would destroy a lot of economic growth. The real problem is in France, and by the way, the same is true for Belgium, where the taxes on workers are so incredibly high that domestic companies are driven out of the market. But this is not a European Union problem. This is not because of the single market, which actually creates a lot of jobs. This is because of the French political class.
So you're saying it's up to the French to lower their standards, not up to some of the other countries to raise their wages?
Well, lower standards. If you look at how high social contributions are, if you look at the state of, for example, the Social Security fund for the independents in France. This is in a deplorable state. So the French state has to get its act together. But I think a lot of people in France actually agree with that. The real question is, why does it not happen? And the reason is because the euro and the ECB provides all this cheap money, so French politicians can just implement the status quo and not change a lot. And I'm afraid that's what Macron will be doing. I think Le Pen would make matters even worse. So in that sense, perhaps I would prefer Macron.
Joachim Birlich, it'll be status quo if Macron is elected?
First, one word about Posted Workers Directive, because there are two sides of a medal. Look at Brexit. Part of the whole Brexit debate in Britain has been the status of these workers that Britain really needs to perform in the industrial field, especially in agriculture and fisheries. One side. Second, France. There are two sides too. Look, for example, at Flamanville, the future nuclear power plant of France, under construction. Where major workers are coming from? The qualified workers? They do not find in France. From where? From Portugal, Spain, from Romania and Poland. Highly qualified, excellent salaries, but the only way to find workers and to finish this construction is to hire foreign workers. And there's the application, and by the way, extremely well controlled, of the Posted Workers Directive is one side. I don't think with Emmanuel Macron we will see what we call business as usual. Europe is not at all business as usual for no one in Europe. And I think Macron has launched a certain number of ideas. He will have to discuss with his partners in the following months. And when I look at France, who will have a new government from June, middle of June, Germany will have, after the elections in September, at the earliest moment in December, a new government. Let's have what Obama has called the strategic patience with Europe. To some extent, and from December on, there will be negotiations between the French and the Germans under inclusion of the Commission and of other partners. And the idea will have to be to stabilize, to strengthen the Eurozone and to strengthen the whole European system in order to support the creation of jobs in Europe. This is clear to both sides.
On that point, Joachim Birlich, every French president, when he gets elected, the first thing he does is go to visit the German chancellor. This one has given a rousing endorsement to Emmanuel Macron. Yes. They all talk about how they're going to, I don't know, hit the reset button, recharge that Paris-Berlin axis that's at the core of the EU. And yet somehow we've kind of muddled along the past decade and a half on this. There hasn't really been any kind of a turbocharging in a long time.
You need, in a relationship, equal partners. And France has become a less equal partner in the last years through the presidency of Sarkozy and of Hollande. This is the problem for the Germans.
And with the British
the Germans need a strong partner on the other side of the Rhine.
And with the British gone, will the French next French president have a bigger role?
Okay. This will be more Franco-German than in the past even. A stronger role for both. And the Germans fear one situation where all the other Europeans reunite themselves around Germany alone, without France. And this is the situation Berlin is fearing at the end of the day.
On the hashtag,
we need a strong France.
On the hashtag F24 debate, the discussion about posted workers prompting this reaction. French election second round demographics perfectly mirror the Brexit vote. Jacques Rupnik, this really seems to be at the heart of what angers a lot of people about the EU.
Well, there is indeed a divide in the attitudes towards Europe, and you could to some extent say that the right-left divide, which we used to have, the two main parties, they didn't make it in the second round. So we have in the second round of the election, Macron versus Le Pen, the European issue as a main dividing line. That is to some extent true, and that is new. And, you know, for all the people who used to write articles and books about Europe is not a salient issue, you know, people only concerned with... No, Europe has become a salient issue. The whole of Europe is watching the French election, and the French election is also about the future of Europe. So never have we been so directly interconnected with Europe. And indeed, that divide, to some extent, but only to some extent, is a divide which has a social dimension. Yes, there are the winners and losers of globalization, and there are those who think that the European Union, including the posted workers directive that you mentioned, is partially at least responsible for the, let's say, the difficulty of the economy or for the social problems connected with it. So, yes, Marine Le Pen will be playing on that divide. The anti-European, socially deprived, the victims of globalization, and those hostile to migration. And on the other hand, you will have those who may think that maybe Europe is not by no means ideal state today,
okay, so
but the alternatives are much worse.
Okay, so posted workers, one of the symbols, but of course the biggest symbol of Europe right now, in a way, of European integration is the common currency, the euro. Over the weekend, Marine Le Pen tweaking her plan to quit that common currency, suggesting a transition period where the French would return to the franc for local purchases while continuing international transactions in euros.
I've always said this was negotiable. It's up to us to negotiate this. I must have said it 100 times. Without a national currency, we can't save jobs and regain the competitiveness that Monsieur Macron hopes to reach by lowering wages and reducing social security benefits.
Media are feeding populism.
The media is feeding populism?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Sophie Raser, what's your religion on the common currency, and what do you think of Marine Le Pen's remarks about a dual currency period?
What we can see in the last couple of days is probably that she's actually stealing some of our vocabulary, but I think it's not fooling people because exactly on this question, the European question, she's been changing every 24 hours her position. So now she's moving toward this question of switching from a single currency to a common currency. Well, it was not the case before, so I think people simply can't follow, really. And this is why I think, you know, what you were saying just a minute ago, we are actually the third way in this. You know, Macron is proposing to deepen the current EU policies. She thinks she can retreat back to within national borders, you know, be cut from the rest of the world. And we were the third way with a strategy. Our Plan B, as we call it, strategy was also part of a Plan A, Plan B. And she keeps forgetting that French people believe that because precisely France is quite a big country and historically important in the European construction, France has a role to play if France wants to reform deeply the European Union for a fairer system, for more social justice, harmonization, social and fiscal harmonization.
All right, better in than out. We're going to get back to this point of what is the future of the euro under the next French president. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.